Hey everyone, Grayson here with another discussion on the channel Based Theory. Today we have Kevin. Kevin and I are going to be discussing a broad range of topics from evolution to abiogenesis and everything in between. So I'm just going to let Kevin introduce himself, and maybe we can just get right into the discussion about what are some potential issues that Kevin might have with evolution. It is my understanding that Kevin is a young Earth creationist. So, Kevin, why, what makes you disagree with the scientific consensus on this one?
Well, let me just start, Grayson, by saying that I began life, when I was in college. I mean, I was an evolution. I believed in evolution. I was a theistic evolutionist, if you want to call
All
it
right.
that. Um, and throughout my tenure in college, nobody had ever, not even once, suggested that there were any problems with evolution per se in any way. And I thought that was interesting because every subject has a yin and a yang, and I was kind of surprised that no one had ever mentioned that. So I started digging a little bit, and surprise, surprise, I came to find out that there was actually a good deal of disagreement about, or not a disagreement necessarily, but a lot of failure to understand why certain systems are the way they are from an evolutionary perspective.
So,
And
in
the,
to make sure I understand, so in your sort of journey towards young Earth creationism began with you being curious about why you had never come across any potential holes or flaws in evolution. So I assume that you searched this on the internet, or like
no,
tried.
this was before the internet, buddy.
So, so you through whatever means you sought out, you were looking for, what are potential problems with evolution, and that's what brought you down this path. Or
Yeah, I started reading books and articles in peer-reviewed science journals and other journals, and I saw that there were questions that really weren't being adequately answered to provide the solid belief that I had that I could rely on an evolutionary perspective.
so are you talking about holes as in like, maybe we don't understand, how an organ evolved or something, or we don't understand, um, how eukaryotes evolved from prokaryotes, or what kind of holes are you talking that made you start to lean towards young Earth creationism?
Well, when you look at nature and you see symbiotic relationships, for example,
Uh huh.
you've got the yucca moth. Without the yucca plant, where would it be? With termites, you've got microbes inside the termites that digest the wood so that the termite can live. And so it's like, what do you get first, chicken or egg kind of a thing? You know,
Okay,
how
so
did
it was. You,
a symbiotic relationship between different plants and critters
yeah.
is an issue, I think.
Why wouldn't symbiotic relationships be able to evolve?
Well, because if the components of the relationship are missing, then what would the implications be for, like, let's say the yucca moth, if there weren't any plants for it to drink nectar out of?
Yeah, but
Uh,
so over time, if both species over time become more and more dependent on each other, then in the past they would be less dependent on each other, and a symbiotic relationship can evolve.
yeah,
I don't
well,
understand what the
okay,
problem is.
that was one thing, but then of course, you've got the whole idea of you know the mousetrap analogy. If there's any components or parts that are missing,
Mhm.
it's not a mousetrap. You know.
Yeah, but are you familiar with, like, and this is quite common in evolution, where um, something will have a function and it will evolve a different function. So it's not like, I mean, the irreducible complexity argument that Behe makes with the mousetrap
Yep.
um, has been pretty handily refuted in the years since that he made it. It's kind of, it's even been shown how a mousetrap could evolve if it was
Okay,
something that's
let's move
capable.
on. Let's move on. I disagree with you on that point, but let's
Okay,
move on. Let's talk about soft tissue and dinosaur fossils.
sure. I love
Um,
that topic very much.
I happen to know Mark Armitage. I know his
Okay.
work, and I know what he's done. And it's not just him. I mean,
Oh,
the
Mary
whole
Shelley
concept.
was the one that was the discoverer of this.
Who?
Mary Shelley,
No, she
or
was the
Mary
one.
Schweitzer. Sorry,
She's the one. Mary
Mary
Shelley is the
Schweitzer.
person who discovered the first fossils.
I
And
I misspoke.
she
I
wrote
meant to say
Frankenstein,
Mary
didn't she?
Schweitzer. Did you hear me?
No.
I misspoke. I meant to say Mary Schweitzer, not Mary Shelley.
Yes, I'm familiar with Mary Schweitzer's work
Yes.
and what she has done. And what I find most interesting is, as is typical from an evolutionary perspective, you're always trying to make a round peg fit into a square hole. So when you come up against soft tissue in a what was supposed to be a mineralized piece of bone, and there's soft tissue there, that's a problem. I'm sorry.
Why
You
is it a
can't you
problem?
can't talk your way around how it's still managed to stay soft over millions of years,
But
even
you
though
can though.
they come up. Well, let me finish. Now you keep
Okay.
interrupting me. All right. So don't talk over me, please. So, when you've got a problem like that, and you have to really, really think hard about how it could be possible. You don't use the Occam's razor approach, which is, hey, the simplest explanation is the most obvious one, which in this case would be, you know, that fossil can't be millions of years old.
Okay. Can I jump in on this? Uh,
Sure.
so I think maybe there's a misunderstanding about what is meant by soft tissues here, because when we're actually referring
Don't
to,
assume there's a misunderstanding, Grayson.
if you'll let me finish here,
Well, don't make those assumptions, okay?
all right. Well, biochemically, can you tell me what molecules constitute the soft tissue? Because that's where I was going with this. So if there's not a misunderstanding, then you should be able to tell me that. If there is, then maybe you can hold on and let me explain what are the actual molecules that are being found here. Because the actual
Go.
molecules that are found in these dinosaur soft tissues are collagen. Now, collagen, all right, is normally just it's the most common protein in the body. Normally, you have long ropes of it. They're not cross-linked. However, in the dinosaur bones, you find collagen broken up into fragments that are highly cross-linked. Now, those cross-linkages are actual chemical bonds that are not observed in any collagen that is fresh. And when it's cross-linked, the stability of collagen goes through the roof. Not only this, but there's a high iron content as well. And we know that iron has a preservative effect. So it is entirely in line with our understanding of biochemistry, why we would find these collagen fragments in dinosaur bones. And I'll tell you what we do not find. We do not find any biomolecules that would degrade in just a couple thousand years.
Okay,
Anything
stop.
that would
Stop.
degrade
My
quickly.
turn. Let me respond.
Okay.
So, collagen, I never said it was fresh, but there should not be any collagen in a fossil. I'm sorry, it should be mineralized. You shouldn't find that in millions of year old fossils. I'm sorry. Please explain to me how that's possible.
I'm happy to, because we actually totally should. And Mary Schweitzer's research indicates that she herself used to be a young Earth creationist. She found all this collagen in dinosaur bones, and she doesn't think that it clashes in any way with their age of millions of years.
I know
And
she doesn't.
she's the expert. You're the one who's claiming that collagen is impossible to exist in millions of year old dinosaur bones, but the actual experts are not agreeing with that claim. In fact, anything that should be, if those dinosaur bones were 6,000 years old or less, we should expect to find DNA. We should expect to find soft tissues that would degrade, like that would not have degraded in that time. We don't find any
How
soft
about a
tissue.
mummified tissue? We
If
do have a dinosaur fossil that has mummified tissue.
are you
You ever
saying
heard
that
about that one? Yeah.
I would believe that that would be fake.
No, it was not. It was found in a coal seam, and it's not fake, and you should probably be aware of that.
You found it.
So, hey,
You
I
know,
would expect that you would find even more of that, but that's just for example.
so if how do you know it's not fake, I guess?
Well, I haven't actually stood in front of it. I haven't actually inspected it myself. So how would any of us know, except for the reports that we get
Well,
from,
I can tell you how, because lots of people thought that initially when Mary Schweitzer found her results, lots of people thought it was fake. But then it went through
oh,
peer review, and the field was proven wrong, and Mary Schweitzer was proven correct, and it was proven through peer-reviewed, published research.
don't talk to me about peer review, Grayson, because peer review sucks, stinks, and is not reliable. And
Well,
if you don't know that yet, I'll be happy to send you some publications from peer-reviewed journals like Nature, for example, that take peer review to task.
so
Don't use
if
that. Don't use that as a reason to believe,
so
because
if
it's
peer
not.
review was flawed, then Mary Schweitzer would not have been vindicated through peer review because initially the field
Hmm.
was against her. And if peer review really was flawed, like you're saying, then she would not have been validated by peer review because they were against her findings
Hmm.
and they
Well,
were
let's see.
unable to prove her wrong.
Okay, well, let's see. Peer review, which is probably one of the most extensive peer-reviewed statements you could make as an evolutionist, is that the fossil record demonstrates evolution,
It
right?
does.
And it does not. If you look closely at what everybody has to say about the fossils, like, for example, Robert Carroll, who wrote an extensive book on vertebrate vertebrates from the very first fish that were vertebrates all the way up to, recent times, you will see that he cites experts who are scratching their heads and have huge moments of conundrum. They cannot describe for you um, where these critters came from, who their predecessors were.
Okay.
Now, two things about fossils, okay? And I'll be quick. Two patterns that show up in the fossil record are stasis, where critters stay the same the whole time they're in the fossil record, and they don't show or indicate any kind of change at all. And then the other pattern is abrupt appearance. They show up fully specialized with no preceding, I guess you call primitive forms, even though they like to say there are primitive um, ancestors. But if you read his book, it's full of verbiage like, well, we don't really know. So no, I'm sorry, I'm not buying it that you can say we don't know for every single critter and then say, well, but evolution's a fact. No,
Well,
no, that's not the way it should work.
the fact that we don't know everything does not
No,
invalidate
no, I'm not
evolution.
saying everything. I'm
Okay.
saying that most stuff you don't. You don't have confirmation for most of
So
these critters.
here, let me walk you through one example of this that
Oh,
might sway you here on this. Okay. Are you
uh,
familiar with the finding of Tiktaalik?
yes, I am.
Okay. So you're familiar that they made the prediction of what they were going to find and where they were going to find it, and then they found exactly what they predicted.
Fine.
So is that a coincidence to you? Is that just they were not onto something? If they said, look, we expect that we should find a transitional form
Mm-hmm.
between fish and land animals, and we expect to find it at this exact layer. And then they went to that layer and they found exactly what they were looking for. They found a fish that had wrist bones and a neck. So, how is that not exactly what they were looking for?
Well, I'm not going to dispute that they made that prediction, but did they also see any ancestral predecessors leading up to that?
Yeah,
And can they contend?
Stega, we've seen lots of, I mean,
Well, I'm
yeah,
not done talking yet. You're still talking over me.
I'm not trying to.
And don't be so eager to jump all over my case, okay? So, did they also find what that critter evolved into. And I'm going to say to you that no, they did not find either one of those.
Well, yes, they did.
No, they didn't. They can imagine that they did, but they didn't. And in fact, if you go back to Robert Carroll's work that I just mentioned, you'll see that on almost every single page, it's we don't know, or we think it must have happened like this, or gosh, experts say it happened like that, but they don't really know.
I
Go
would.
read the book. Go read the book, Vertebrate Evolution.
So I would posit that that's just how all scientific writing is written.
Yeah.
I mean, if you read anything in science, you're going to find language exactly like you've described. Like
Sure.
Scientists are very cautious, and they couch their claims.
But they're not cautious when they say evolution's a fact. And they base that statement on stuff like what you find in Robert Carroll's book. So I'm sorry, you can't say that we don't have any evidence for it, but yeah, it's a fact and we know it. You can't do that. That's called dishonest. That's dishonest.
Let's talk about the overwhelming weight of evidence in favor of evolution for a second, okay? Because
overwhelming to who?
Please don't interrupt me, okay? So if we talk about the fossil record for a second, genetics actually allows us to predict what we should find in the fossil record. And this, to me, is the most overwhelming, non-disputable evidence for evolution. So I want to hear your take on it. Because when we look at the genetics and we compare living organisms today genetically, the more similar they are genetically allows us to predict the types of fossils that we find in the fossil record. For example, right? Crocodiles are more genetically similar to birds than they are to lizards. Did you know that?
But they're not lizards and they're not birds.
Exactly. But you're comparing the similarities. So genetically, like the amount of similarities in their genetics. If you compare, crocodiles are more similar to birds than they are to lizards genetically. Now that allows us to make a prediction. We would predict that in the fossil record, we should find animals that share traits of birds and traits that they have in common with crocodiles and archosaurs, which is the more
and we broad. Do. And we find that.
Yes, we do.
But that doesn't mean that they're evolutionary, that they have an evolutionary linkage. What you find, like I said before, Grayson, what you find is stasis. You find all kinds of variety, but they do not change into anything else. They stay the same. And they show up abruptly, like, in the Cambrian, trilobites. Thousands of species, boom, just showed up out of nowhere. We don't know where they came from. We don't know what went before them. And that's a huge problem for evolution.
So with trilobites specifically, we actually do observe change in trilobites, evolving more complex eyes as you go up in layers.
You're making the assumption. Yeah, that's an assumption.
Don't interrupt for a second.
No, you don't. No, you're making a false statement. And I'm not going to stop interrupting you on that.
Okay.
When you say that we can see that they evolved more complex eyes, that's a bunch of baloney. What they had was they had different kinds of eyes, and they always stayed the same. They did not evolve.
So here's what I'll say then. In the most bottom layers, their eyes are more simple than in the layers that are above them, in which we observe more complex eyes. So we do observe changes.
You're not answering my basic claim, which is they showed up abruptly, fully specialized, mind you, fully complex with these incredible eyes. No, not simple ones. They had, had eyes that were like dragonfly eyes. Okay, they showed up without any precursors, and that's a big problem for evolution. I'm sorry, you can't get around that.
Well, you can, because again, I think you might be a little out of date here. You're thinking.
No, I think that you are the one out of date, and I'm done.
Do you know what the ediacaran is? Oh, wow. So that was very quick. Is he leaving? Well, that was very fast. Honestly, from our text exchanges, I thought that he was a lot less arrogant than that. I'm actually kind of surprised that he came out with that much attitude, because he was very polite on text. I mean, he was very polite, and he seemed like he wanted to get into more of these concepts on an actual deep level. And he even said that he was looking forward to learning a lot from this conversation. So the fact that well, the fact that he came out with that kind of attitude and was not didn't really actually seem interested in learning anything or having any kind of genuine conversation is kind of a shock to me, actually. I mean, it really shouldn't be. I know you guys are saying that shouldn't be shocking compared to all the people that you've talked to with similar views to him. But yeah, I mean, I guess Otangelo introduced us in a group chat, and yeah, he came across as at least the more sane and level-headed when compared to Otangelo. So maybe it was just a bad metric to use. But yeah, that's I would say that that's a record, but I think that I have had faster rage quits in debates before. But I was really looking forward to asking him why it is that in the fossil record we can predict what we should find based on genetic comparisons today. That seems to me pretty very extremely strong evidence that evolution happened and that separate creation did not happen. So far I've never heard a creationist be able to explain that properly, but I guess this guy just knows more. The Cambrian explosion, therefore creation happened. I was going to ask him if he'd ever heard of the Ediacaran period, which pretty clearly has precursors to a lot of the flora fauna of the Cambrian, but we couldn't even get that far in a conversation. I don't know if he just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, or if he just never woke up out of bed and just came in with I don't know. I'm genuinely surprised by the amount of attitude that he was bringing in with that. And yeah, he said that he's allowed to interrupt if I say something wrong, but I'm not allowed to interrupt him, even though he pretty much exclusively said wrong things. So that's just how it goes with this sometimes, guys. You know, if you are or know of a creationist who maybe has a little bit thicker skin, not so prone to their emotions taking control, or you know, is just capable of having a mature, normal conversation with another human being, send them my way, because I still like talking about these topics, whether or not you know the opposition is able to. And yeah, Riv, I agree. We didn't even get to bring up the heat problem. He said that he wanted to talk about abiogenesis, the origin of life, free will, determinism, all of this stuff, information. He said he wants to talk about all this, and we couldn't even make it through like 20 minutes. So pretty shocking. But yeah, I think I'm going to call it here, guys. I was looking forward to this debate. You know, I love talking about these topics, but I guess the creationists, they just they can't stand the heat. So they need to get out of the kitchen.